So we try to look what is happening at the occupied territories through the glasses of the hybrid threats and hybrid warfare, and it's a learning field for us as well, because for the first time we have adversary who is doing hybrid warfare with a physical access to people and territory. So if what we are observing in Ukraine is like, okay, this information doesn't work, it doesn't bring the expected results, then you can kill some people, deport them, bring some settlers, change the ethnic composition of the land, and then you might have a end result. And what are the main goals of the kind of Russian hybrid warfare and its policies in the occupied territories? As we look at it, it's basically to turn occupied territories in the military buffer zone, which will serve or should serve as a direct support for its war. So there are a lot of ammo storages, transportation, background, basically the kind of backstage of its military effort. Then gain total control over the population, and it's also achieved. The main goal is to kind of prevent any armed resistance, and then exploit the region, because the region should start to serve the Russian state. It means exploiting people and its economy. Then the Ukrainization of people and land, and basically Putin many times claimed that there is no Ukrainian nation either nor the state. And what they are doing, what the Russians are doing on the occupied territories, is they try to bring those words into the life. And then kind of a final overarching goal of all of it is to make the changes irreversible on the occupied territories, basically, and therefore make any reconnection with the Ukraine virtually impossible. They attempt to make it impossible. And let's try to look at the main tools that they are using in it. And it's a mix of the kind of military tools to achieve non-military goals and non-military tools to achieve some military goals. So it's a mixture of things. But one of the well-established tactics is the Urbicide. So basically, deliberate destruction of cities. It's one of the, as I mentioned, the main tactics of the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. It allows to compensate for the poor performance of its ground forces by brutal combination of the kind of siege war, bombardment, and deliberate targeting of the civilian targets. And it allows to achieve several goals. As I said, some of them are military, some kind of out of militarism. So it's reduced the operational capabilities of the Ukrainian armed forces, basically, and of the society to resist. And it's by destroying civilian infrastructure, power plants, electricity grids, industrial complexes, hospital, hotels, restaurants, and transportation nodes. Another important goal is to increase the outflow of the refugees, so to put additional burden of the Ukraine, and then devastated cities it's much easier to control and to occupy. If you have only 20% of the residents that decided to stay in the city, it's so easier to control it. And as we see now in the way how Russians are seizing cities, basically nobody is staying here. This is a picture from Wundehar, which was just recently seized by Russians after 2 years of fighting, and basically the city is completely desolated. And another very important goal of Russian Urbicide tactics, which is not many often mentioned but expert, is basically by destroying those cities, Russia is destroying important hubs of national building, kind of urban centers, which were very important with a robust activism, with NGOs, with the third sector, with a wide spread of nation building, especially after 2014. By destroying those cities, Russia tried to kind of destroy those communities, and by that, by destroying those communities, then it's a kind of precondition and starting point for reformatting those territories. First, keep it under its influence, and then later to kind of consolidate it under the Russian identity. Another important military tool is a kind of deliberate and systemic brutality of the Russian armed forces. And this tactic of brutalization is well established within Russian military. We've been seeing it in different places in the world already. And they consider it as kind of best tool to break a societal resistance. So what we've been seeing is the large-scale sexual violence, targeted and random killings of civilian, pillage and tortures, especially at the beginning of the occupation. Then, when the situation stabilized, we see that the military personnel and special services are playing a key role in enforcing control and maintaining order in the occupied territories. And the martial law provides kind of a legal framework that allows Russians to operate disregarding the law, really. So we have a curfew, checkpoints, we have a screening of the population every day. And this is reinforced further by a bill of confiscation of properties and deportation. And after the front stabilized, we saw that at the beginning, maybe we thought that what was happening in Ukraine is a maybe kind of a random act of violence, which of course happens when there is a war. But what we observe in Ukraine is that we can see that this is a kind of deliberate strategy, which is developing in a kind of systemic and intentional way. Another important military tool which is used in the occupied territories is transformation of all the regions in the kind of military buffer zone. So de facto, the occupied territories are a militarized zone, even though in kind of they were incorporated officially in the Russian Federation. However, there are kind of there are checkpoints. You cannot cross easily from main Russia to occupied territories. The border is still there. The martial law is operating there. So this is still, the whole territory is a kind of gray zone between Russia and Ukraine. The primary focus is on, throughout the whole occupied territories, on developing the military infrastructure only. So of course you saw Putin visiting Mariupol and kind of new block of flats, but it was kind of for a show-off. Mostly 95% of the all investments are going into kind of military infrastructure, so logistic transportations, industrial base, etc. All the local economy and therefore local population is kind of subordinate to this war effort. And this means exploitation of local citizens. This also includes conscription in the regular army. There were some cadet schools established on the occupied territories, and forced passportization is part of it. Another important kind of Russian tools and what they are doing is a subjugation of the local population through different means. Basically, they try to solidify their presence there and impose their authority of the population, which has a strong kind of inclination to resistance. And many of those methods bear a hallmark of war crimes. But the primary goal is to kind of break the social will to resist and coerce those people in accepting Russian citizenship. So what we observe is the whole kind of network of filtration camps established throughout all the region, including Crimea. So basically there are checkpoints. You cross the checkpoint because you go to work, there is a new checkpoint on the street. You are cross to the checkpoint and then they ask you, why do you still don't have a Russian passport? Then they send you to the filtration camp and it depends, you might be kicked out, your biometrics is taken, pictures, etc., all your data. You might be lucky to be kicked out, or you might be sent to the prison if they consider you dangerous or that you are suspicious and you may hold some important information. They try to take it out of you. And there is the whole network as well, parallel network of kind of illegal detention and torture centers. And it's one of main tools to intimidate people, to spread fear, and to kind of keep control over the population. And as I mentioned, the kind of martial law make it all possible and create the legal framework for that. And of course, those detention centers, sometimes there is just a cellar in one of the buildings, or there is a garage which was just secure for this, and people are locked there for days. Detainees face severe physical and psychological abuse, including beatings, electric shocks, mock executions, sexual violence, and psychological torture as well. Another important tool of subjugating Ukrainian population is using property deprivation as a kind of tool also to exchange change the demographic composition of occupied territories. Just in 2022, just the Mariupol was seized. After a couple of weeks, Russian announced 1,000 apartments are as ownerless, and they were transferred to Russian military and people who are coming from mainland Russia to serve in administration, in security services. And it's happening every couple of months. They're announcing new apartment as a kind of ownerless, and therefore they might be seized by Russians. And of course, there is a forced mobilization, which was already observed in the Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast, in Crimea. In Crimea, especially, the focus was on the Crimean Tatars community, which were drafted into the army in the large numbers. And now we are seeing the same in the occupied territories of just recently seized by Russians. And of course, there is the De-Ukrainization. So the cultural, I would say, is a primary domain where Russia attempts to erase Ukrainian identity and Russify the occupied territories and their citizens. First, they eliminate the most pro-Ukrainian people. Then they take care of the cultural objects, and what remains, finally, they rename as Russian. So as they enter the territories, they immediately start with kind of eliminating the most pro-Ukrainian citizens. So they were looking for combatants from the previous anti-terrorist operations. They were removing people who work in public administration, who were somehow related with security services, and then as well as intellectuals, writers, voluntarists, anybody who was kind of express any pro-Ukrainian sentiment or any patriotic leanings. So that was the kind of a first step. Then what we observed was a looting of the historical artifacts. So only in Melitopol and Mariupol, they stole thousands of objects, including kind of golden city and gold artifacts, and they transferred them to the Russian cultural institutions, Russian museums. And therefore, later, it's easier for them to claim that there is no Ukrainian state, and we can clearly prove that, showing you some exhibitions, showing you that it's only part of the Russian history, everything is there. Of course, on the occupied territories, Russian basically replaced Ukrainian names and symbols immediately. Street, public places, monuments, some are destroyed, some are removed, and the Lenin monuments are appearing again on the occupied territories. There are new holidays, new celebrations, and there is a massive propaganda as well. So it's not anymore just on the internet or on social media, but it's posters on the city, leaflets. There are kind of new heroes promotes, festivals, holidays that are aggressively replacing Ukrainian ones, and people are forced to attend them. And what I find really kind of powerful about this picture, this was taken in Borodyanka, the city which was seized by Russians, and one of the first things they did was to kill Taras Shevchenko monument, and it's a kind of very powerful symbol of what is happening. So they came not only to kill living Ukrainians, but also those from the past. So to kill their kind of culture and everything what is connected with Ukrainianness of those lands. What makes it all difficult is that those people who are left there are basically cut off from the Ukrainian internet, Ukrainian mobile service. Russians are jamming those services, and the only way to access mobile services or internet is through the Russian SIM card. And for that, you need, again, you need Russian passport. Basically, the life without Russian passport in the occupied territories is impossible. You cannot go to the doctor, you cannot register your car, register your property, and they have their kind of way to force you into that. Therefore, okay, if you are ill, you can still find some friends who knows a doctor and then can help you without the passport. But then a couple of weeks later, you may face a letter from the administration that you need to register your property within the Russian kind of register. Otherwise, you will lose it. So, okay, at this stage, you decide, I try to oppose this as long as I could. So you accept this passport so you can kind of go on with your life and survive somehow. And then 4 weeks later, you receive a conscription letter, you or your son, because you all accepted the passport, therefore you are Russian citizens, you are in the kind of registry now, and then that's how they kind of abuse this. As I mentioned, the media are completely isolated and absorbed that this kind of Ruski Mir, and Russian soldiers, it's very tricky to use VPN, even if you want to try to access the kind of independent media or Ukrainian media or international media. Because on the checkpoints, soldiers are checking browsing history, checking the whole of your kind of phone, your pictures, etc. So people are really afraid of doing that. And basically the whole TVs, all broadcasts, everything is filled with Russian narratives, which are filled with hatred, contempt, and violence as a quintessence of Ruski Mir, I would say. And to leave you with a couple of final thoughts, because I know you gather here to discuss and to think about the future of Ukraine and future of the region, is a couple of thoughts for you. Under the martial law, Russia has been conducting a large-scale reformatting of occupied territories. And the main goal is to completely change the character of those lands, erasing their Ukrainian heritage from that and imposing Ruski Mir identity. Through the application of aggressive and brutal tools of social engineering, it means killing, imprisonment, deportation, influx of settlers, education, conscriptions, Russia aimed to make these changes virtually impossible to reverse and establishing kind of fait accompli on the ground. Any settlement of the conflict, which includes accepting Russian territorial gains, and from time to time we hear about it from different places, means basically that we agree to the continuation of the Kremlin genocidal policies on the ground. Therefore, it is crucial to continuously and systematically document the Russian war crimes on the occupied territories. And the truth is that only the return of those lands to Ukraine would mean the end of the violence against Russian, Ukrainian population. Total control over the information flows in the occupied territories, combined with the limited access to the population and kind of fear of people to use VPN services because of the screening procedures, make the whole suffering on the occupied territories almost invisible. And I would say it's one of the most underreported aspect of this war. What is happening then? We are completely in the unknown. The longer the occupation lasts, the worse its impact is on the local population, with broken societies and broken human lives. And it will allow Russia to continue these policies, and the stabilization on the front help them to kind of bring additional resources to the region, while the formal incorporation into the Russian Federation allows to kind of consolidate all-encompassing effort to change those lines and kind of developing its Russification policies. And that's all I prepared for you today. Thank you.